Hello class and welcome to chapter 9. In this chapter we're going to be talking about strategy implementation. So let's get started. We all know that a strategy is only as good as its ability to be implemented. In this lecture we're going to talk about what goes on in terms of implementing a strategy and pitfalls that people typically run into when they're implementing a strategy. You need to ask yourself 3 questions. 1, who are the people that are going to carry out this strategic plan? 2, what must be done to align company operations with the strategic plan? And 3, how is everyone going to work together to do what's needed? These 3 questions, while they may seem very simplistic on the surface, are actually very broad and have lots of subcomponents underneath them. Implementation of organizational strategies run into a variety of problems for a ton of different reasons. This slide here shows you just a handful of those reasons. For time's sake, I'm not going to go through every problem that people run into in terms of implementation, but we will pull out a couple of them. 1, it took longer than planned to implement. This is very common. You write out a strategy, it sounds great on paper, it sounds like we have all the resources, the people, the capabilities to do it. When we put it into place, it ends up taking longer than we expected. Unexpected problems begin to emerge. People's training is not as robust and as well done as we thought it would be. And simply put, it just takes us longer. Poor coordination. Employees and people are not coordinating and speaking with each other very well. Or if they are, it's poor quality communication. So the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. Many times there's uncontrollable external environmental factors that take place. Maybe the government just passed a new regulation right when you're about to launch that new product, and it's causing you to have to go back to the drawing board to redo that. Or maybe you have to get a certain patent approval or licensing approval or something like that, and then it doesn't go the way that you expected. So you have to work through those problems and challenges. Poor departmental leadership and direction. This is a big one. A lot of times we can write a strategy, provide it to people, even do training, so we're confident that the employees know exactly what they're supposed to do. But here's where I ask you to take a deeper thought. Have you ever been in a class and had a professor explain a project to you? And when you're in class, you're listening, you're like, yep, I got it, I know exactly what to do. However, a couple days later, when you sit down and start working on that project yourself, you realize that your understanding is not as complete as you thought it was. There's lots of things that you have questions about. And it's hard for you even to get started without going back and having a personal consultation with that professor to understand all the things that he was asking of you. It's the same way when it comes to leadership and implementing strategies. A lot of times you put employees through training, you give them the resources, you give them information to read, and then when it comes time to implement, they find out that they still feel inadequate in terms of their education and training, and there's problems begin to ensue. There are lots of problems when it comes to implementing a strategy. This doesn't mean that those problems are not solvable. It just means that you should be aware of them and that you should expect structure follows strategy. And here's what this means. You're in an organization, you create a new strategy. Then new administrative problems begin to emerge, challenges which prevent you from implementing the strategy perfectly. The firm begins to lose revenue, or that strategy does not produce the revenue that it expected. Then you have to go back and reinvent the strategy. Create new structure, new policies to correct or address the areas where the strategy proved to be deficient. And then you begin to receive the profits or the revenues that you expected. So as you can see, structure follows strategy. The strategy was created, problems came into place, structure was added to address those issues, and then from there, you're able to return back to your profits. So you'll see that in many organizations, strategy is created, and then the organization is structured and designed to help implement that strategy throughout its problems. There are 4 different stages of corporate development. So if you look at the life cycle, which we talked about earlier in this chapter, if you look at the life cycle of an organization, when an organization is first formed by the entrepreneur, it is very dynamic, very flexible. You don't have a lot of employees. Employees are doing multiple job roles. You may have someone who's doing marketing and accounting. You may have somebody who's doing IT and marketing, but there's great overlap. There's tremendous flexibility, and people are willing to move around and shift as necessary to see that organization get started. As you move to additional stages in the maturity of the life cycle, you need more focus on functional structure. Here's where I begin to create departments within the organization. Marketing department, finance department, IT department, and you'll see that jobs and responsibilities and roles begin to get much more systematically defined around those functional areas. The next comes the divisional structure. Here's where you begin to create various divisions within the company. So let's say you may have 4 or 5 different product lines. Well, each product line then begins to look like its own division, where they're focusing on specifically that product and how to get that product to market, how to increase revenue for that product, how to add new features and innovations to that product. Everything begins to focus around divisions. If your company continues to grow in its revenue and its size, you begin to enter into what's called SBUs, or strategic business units. This is where one product begins to look like its own company within your company. We call that a strategic business unit. Organizations that typically have SBUs begin to look more matrix and very networked. Now, for me to get deep into the concept of a matrix organization in terms of employee structure and departmental structure is well beyond the context of this lecture. So I won't get into that, but just understand that in a matrix organization, it is inherently complex. And you may even have multiple people or entities or stakeholders that you're responsible and that you answer to within that organization. Now, when it comes to implementation of strategies, it's important to note that the challenges you may face could come from either inside the organization as well as outside the organization. Some examples of challenges that help prevent or slow down the implementation of a strategy would be lack of resources. Maybe you don't have enough people. Maybe you don't have the right amount of money. Maybe you have people, but they're not properly trained. Refusal of top management to delegate. A lot of times as leaders, we believe that we have a very clear vision and that we're the only people that can do it. Well, in fact, the only way for a large organization to be successful is through delegation. You have to trust the subordinates beneath you to do a good job. Focus on your training and empowering them to do the job correctly. You also could run into a number of external challenges: the economy, labor shortages, lack of market growth. Any of these things could derail a great strategy. That wraps it up for this lecture. If you have any questions, I ask you to send them via email or bring them to the class if we're meeting physically for class, and I'll be happy to answer them. Until next time, thank you and take care.